Everyone wants to know why someone comes to Krishna. That is real nectar, right? Real nectar. So, my story is very simple. I am from America in the 1960s. I was a student. Not in college, in the school before college. And the times in America were very great upheaval. You know that word, upheaval? Great unrest for reasons dealing with civil rights, but mostly dealing with war. Kali Yuga is filled with wars. And this war in America was very bad because the system was that they started a mandatory, they call it draft. That means when you become 18 years old, you get a card from what they call the Selective Service. It has your social security number. And then they have a machine, like a lottery. And if you win that lottery, you die. That's what it was. They pull your name and they send you to Vietnam to die. And so this was, everyone was in high school, 17, 16, thinking, I want to go to college. I don't know what I want to do, but I know the government wants to kill me. So that was the time that I was living in. So that made everyone of my generation, not everyone, but many people of my generation search, looking for something different. And that was what made Indian philosophy, Vedic culture, yoga, mantras, that became very, very popular in America. And it was fueled by this desire to find something different. This is not, my life doesn't make sense if they're going to send me to die for something that no one even knows why. No one even understood. Why are we fighting this war? Sometimes they have reasons. If your country is attacked, okay, that's a reason to fight a war. In America, no one understood. Why are we fighting this Vietnam War? And before that, why are we fighting Korean War? All these wars, people didn't understand why. So I was just part of that search. Youth, teenagers, looking. And the books that were very popular, because ISKCON, Hare Krishna movement, had not started selling books yet. I mean, Prabhupada's abridged Bhagavad Gita came out in 1968. The unabridged Bhagavad Gita as it is didn't come out until 1972. So in the 60s, we didn't have Prabhupada's books yet. We had no Prabhupada books. So you have so many people looking for something different, and there's no books. So what did Prabhupada do? He said, everyone who comes to me, your temple service is to go into the streets of your city with kartal, mridanga, and 8 or 10 hours just walk and chanting Hare Krishna and let people hear the Maha Mantra. And then when you come to a nice place where you might stop and people might form a crowd, speak for 5 or 10 minutes, and then start walking again. And so Prabhupada had the devotees in all the cities. There were only about, when I joined, there were maybe 15 temples. And America has many cities, so I was lucky. They had just started a temple in Portland, Oregon. And that's where I decided to go to college. So anyway, before that, when I was a student in high school, the only books on yoga for people searching were the Mayavad books, the bogus yogi books. From this yogi had some little powers, how wonderful. This yogi had, they had these crazy books that everyone loved. Oh, my guru, I'm not kidding, it said it in the book. When he went to the latrine, it would smell like a rose. Oh, how wonderful. That's yoga. This was in the books that were very, very popular in America in the 1960s. And some nonsense, one yogi could levitate a little bit off the ground. Oh, great mystic power. But it made people start wondering, there's something so much more than the bodily concept of life. There's energies and subtle, ethereal levels of life that we can't see with our gross eyes. At least those books gave that idea. That was the only good thing about it. The rest was terrible. Because there was never God except you become God. The goal, if you get more and more into yoga and power, then you will realize that you all along were God and you forgot that you were God. This is the kind of God they were promoting. It doesn't make sense how God could fall asleep, be in illusion, right? And one day remember, oh, I am God. I was always God. How did I ever forget I was God? But these are the books of the Mayavads. That's their philosophy. So that's the only books we had. So just think how Prabhupada's books have saved the world from the calamity of impersonalism and voidism. Because before Prabhupada's books, there were no books telling the true Vaishnava Siddhanta. Just this nonsense that you can become one with everything and either disappear, like in Buddhism, or become one with everything and think you're God. Anyway, the one good thing I got from those books is the idea that in order to get realization, God, self-realization, that's what they called it, self-realization, you needed a mantra. The spiritual vibration would open up parts of you, and they call it chakra, nonsense things. Open up and you would have these great realizations and powers and all these things. So the idea of mantra was very powerful, very popular. And Prabhupada told the devotees in all the different cities, go out and give them the mantra. Just have beautiful kirtan party, beautiful chanting with mridanga and kartals, and just, that was the service. You wake up, you have the morning program, take a little prasad, and immediately go out. Sometimes during lunchtime, a car would come from the temple, find where you are, the kirtan party, take a break for 30 minutes with paper plates, give you some khichdi or something, and then immediately start chanting again till 6 or 7 at night. Come back, take shower, and have the evening program. So that was ISKCON. The whole day, other than the devotees who were cooking or doing the deities, that was, everybody else was doing kirtan, sankirtan. So I went to some college with the idea that let's see what I can find out more about yoga and spiritual life. But I have to go to college, so maybe I picked a college that I thought might have that. And of course, the college, there's no college program that teaches you why were you born. There's no college course called Why Were You Born? And there is no college course called What is Beyond Death? What is beyond birth and death? There's no college course about that. So even though people had the desire to learn, they could not get any knowledge from their college. So and there's many devotees like me, remember, being American body, this is not our family religion, right? So we have no idea anything about Krishna or Vishnu or Vaikuntha or anything like that. But we had some faith in yoga or meditation or mantras. And then there was Prabhupada delivering the holy names in cities all over America. And we would look at these devotees who were chanting. And this was not like a job. This was not like work. You know, dreary work. You go to any office and everyone's just working and not happy. These devotees that were doing this chanting for 8-10 hours every day, they were jumping and dancing, and I never saw anyone so happy. So that was very nice. But like many devotees, the first contact I had I was walking to college from my apartment, and I heard the kartals. And it was just like, there's a story in America about a person with some mystic power, and he could play a flute, and people would just follow him. And they called him the Pied Piper. And anyone who heard the flute, they would just follow. There's some story in the Western world. So the kartals worked like that. Devotees like me just heard the kartals. That's a spiritual sound. That kartal, the soul recognizes that sound. And something else was happening, Prabhupada said, which just is a matter of pure dumb luck, timing, being by accident in the right place. Because Prabhupada was there, his Guru Maharaj and Lord Chaitanya were either sending souls to help or taking some dull soul totally in Maya and just waking them up enough to help. But they were sending people to help Prabhupada. So I'm one of those, just sent to help Prabhupada, pure dumb luck. So that was that awakening, just a kartal. And I was awake. And I remember to this day walking around the streets to try to find where that sound of kartal was coming from. So I'm searching and searching until I finally saw, oh, there's devotees. Now, the first time I saw them chanting, that was the next awakening. Because remember, devotee is a spiritual sight. Devotee doing his service is not a material activity, is not anything material. That is something very spiritual. But especially when devotees are chanting, that's the most spiritual activity of any devotee. So I'm trying to find this sound. And then I see about 8 devotees. That's all there were in Portland, maybe 8 devotees. And I just thought, oh my, I can't believe this. I thought the only way to get a mantra from these books I was reading is I have to give up my life, go somehow to India, go somehow to Himalayas, somehow go into some cave, find some yogi, be a servant for many years, and then finally one day, maybe in that cave, he'll give me a mantra. That was the romantic idea of how you got a mantra. That's what people thought. So now I'm looking at these 8 devotees, and I'm awakened. I go, oh my, these are the greatest yogis on the planet. I just felt that. I don't have to go to some cave in the Himalayas. They have brought the mantra to us, to me, and for free. I don't have to be some slave or servant for so many years, and eventually, finally, they give you some mantra, which is a very popular idea with yogis and Buddhists and so on, that you work very hard, they finally give you, they'll let you in on their secret teachings. No, here is the Harinam Sankirtan giving you the Harinam, holy name, immediately, most powerful mantra, bringing it to you. So naturally, I was thinking, these must be the greatest yogis in all the world. That's what I thought. And many devotees like me had that same experience. You all know Indradumna Swami. He was living in a different city, Detroit. Same thing happened to him. Vishnu John was there. He goes into his backyard. He hears that sound. He's awake. Now he searches. Just my story. He had to find where that sound was coming from. So in those days, since this talk is titled The Early Days, it's not really the early days, it's the establishment of Krishna consciousness through Sankirtan, through chanting the holy names in public, not just for private. That was the other thing. We realized when we saw these devotees on Sankirtan that they're not just keeping this treasure for themselves. Look at this. This is sharing with everyone. How selfless, how compassionate, how merciful, how loving. All of these understandings were coming just from seeing the chanting. One time, just seeing it, and you would get these ideas. So I got into this habit on my way to class, after class, and sometimes skipping class. Let me walk around the city streets and see if I can hear the kartal. I had no idea where they would be. I'd never been to the temple. Just seeing them, monks, men and women dressed like monks, giving mantras out. So I was doing that for about a month. And I felt I have spent my young life looking for a guru, looking for a path to yoga, looking for a path back to Godhead, looking for a path to self-realization. I think this is it, this mantra. I think this is really it. And everyone has in their heart knots, right? We were just talking about this coming here. The knot that's in everyone's heart, in every species of life, the first original knot is the sex knot. And from that knot, you're immediately connected and tied to the material energy. And then from that connection to the material energy, the next knot comes. From sex, you have to have some money to afford sex. You have to have a place to have sex, right? So in this way, people get money, they get land, they get a home. Eventually they get a wife. Then the next knot is the children. Meanwhile, there's the knots of the friends and the family knot and the community knot. And then there's the knot of my city knot. I am from this city, so I have to care about this city only. They have sports teams. I only care about winning in that city sports team. Oh, on and on. Then the nation knot. And there's so many knots. So for me, my knot, it wasn't so obvious, the original knot. So for me, the knot was, I was first born, I had a knot to my family. What will they think? I just went to college, they just paid for it. Now, if I give up going to college, they will be so hurt. It's not, and I move into some yoga ashram, and I shave my head, and I wear dhoti. I mean, this is like very strange in America. No one had ever seen this. So one day I was so anxious to join, but I was so held back by this knot. And this very nice temple president who was leading this kirtan every single day, his name was Lochan Das. You all know Lochan Das, even though you don't know him. Because Lochan eventually, because really, more than a temple manager, he was an artist. And more than an artist, he was a sculptor. And later on in the 1970s, he made the murti of Srila Prabhupada that is in every Vyasasana of every ISKCON temple in the world. So all of you know Lochan through his service. The Prabhupada murti is from him. He's a famous sculptor. Very lifelike, very perfect. So anyway, before he became this famous sculptor, he was just leading kirtan. And one day he saw, I was so perplexed, he could tell, he would see me every 2-3 days chanting with them. And he said, "What's wrong?" And I told him, I have this attachment. I don't want to hurt my parents. They'll be very hurt. This is not their culture. It's not their philosophy. They have a different religion. And he told me something very wonderful. He told me that it is written and explained by Srila Prabhupada, if you become a pure devotee of Krishna, then many generations of your family in the future, now living in the past, many generations of your family, they will get a blessing. They will even become liberated if there is a pure devotee in their family. And he quoted the Bhagavad Gita about this. And when he said those words to me, just like with the kartal, and just like with seeing the Harinam Kirtan, so then I saw those words were coming from God. I just had that moment. This is the absolute truth. I knew it. So what did I do? And this is a little funny. I was standing up, I fell like a rod, straight down on the sidewalk. My hands were holding his feet. I was crying like a baby. I couldn't speak. I mean, I felt the word of God. So I was having some ecstatic symptom. That was what Prabhupada brought to anyone with no background, no qualification. He could give you ecstatic symptoms. That's Prabhupada. So I'm just barely able to speak. So I'm holding on to his feet, literally lying straight, Dandavat, where everyone thought I was completely insane. And I'm just saying, you've saved me. You saved me. Over and over. And then finally, I was able to compose myself. I stood up, and you know what the next thing I did was? I ran away. Now they were sure I was crazy, right? This is the behavior of a crazy person. Where did I run? I ran to my apartment. I had set up a little yoga house for the anyone who wanted to do yoga. There were 4 of us, and I was the head. I had gotten the apartment, and I packed up all my stuff. I told them, I'm leaving. Where are you going? I'm going to the college campus to sell everything I have. And so I set up a table and I sold everything I have, books, records, whatever I had, I sold. And then that night, with a little bag, I finally went to the temple for the first time. And I'm knocking on the door of the Portland temple. And it was like 8 at night or something. Lochan opens the door. And he was surprised. There I am with a bag, like ready to move in. And I had all the money I had from my cells, a couple of $100. And I gave it to him. Said, this is for your rent. Could I stay with you? So that's how I came to Krishna consciousness, by the power of the holy name and the power of Vaishnav compassion and mercy, of going out as devotees, distributing freely love of God. It works. Many devotees like me came to this movement with a story just like this. So it's very nice and enjoyable to hear what makes a devotee, what makes someone come to be a devotee. It's always nectar to hear how this happens. So, we have a little more time or no? I want to tell you something about your deities. You have to give me a few minutes because I haven't looked at this in a little while. I want to find let's see if I can find some pages. What I'm looking through is in January 1977. Well, actually, in December, just before the marathon of 66, I wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada asking, could I, because he had made me a GBC at the beginning of 1976. So I wrote a letter, and Prabhupada, could I travel with you and be your secretary for 1 month? And just have you teach me. I mean, it was very romantic, you know. Lord Chaitanya would teach Sanatana Goswami and once teach, so I thought, let me ask. And Prabhupada said, of course. So I arrived here in Bombay, I think it might have been January 4th or 5th. I got off the plane, I ran right up to his quarters. And Prabhupada said, oh, you have come. And you must be very tired. And I said, no, Prabhupada, I'm seeing you. I don't feel tired at all. And I didn't feel tired at all. And that was something about being with Srila Prabhupada. For those who had the time, the opportunity to be part of his traveling or living with him, or when he stayed in the temple for some time, whatever, being on that schedule, when you were on Prabhupada's schedule, we used to call it Prabhupada time. It's a different kind of time where You don't feel hungry. You don't feel tired. You don't know why, you know why, and you're laughing. I don't feel tired. And you could be up all night, and it wouldn't matter because you're feeling this ecstasy from Prabhupada. Just by his association, you're feeling this. The spiritual world is like in him and around him and coming out of him, and you feel it. So, this book is, we're always recording Prabhupada conversations, but, and there's like, there's hundreds and hundreds of pages of conversations that I was able to record that month. But this book is when the tape recorder was not on. And I was just sitting with Prabhupada, and he would say something, and I would just really quickly scribble a few words to try to remember what the whole sentence was, you know, like shorthand. So these are just a few things that Prabhupada used to tell me about your deities, Sri, Sri Sita, and Ram. Sita, Lakshmi Devi, is under the protection of Ravana in America. And Ram, Lord Narayan, is in India. So we must get Lakshmi and bring her back to Narayan. Just like Ram, Hanuman had to cross the ocean. So I have done. Ram trained the forest monkeys how to fight. Just see the lesson. America and India. The combination of Lakshmi and Narayan, and also of Saraswati. India, Saraswati. So he said, America and India, Lakshmi and Saraswati. They are two sisters. This can save the whole world. America can become the leader of the world if she takes Indian culture. If I can't find some more about Sita Ram, I'll just start reading some of the other things. But oh, I should start at the beginning. Okay. Indian culture and American money, again, Sita and Ram, can solve all the problems of the world. Lame man That was India, because it was poor. Blind man. That's America. Lame man and blind man together. This should be preached. I'll just start reading some other nectar. If I come across some more Sitaram. There were many things that Prabhupada was saying about this combination of America, Lakshmi, and Ram, Indian culture, that I have in here, but let me just read a few little nectarine things that Prabhupada would say. Scientific advancement. Scientific advancement is turning men into asses, directing whatever little intelligence they have in ass-like activity, by creating an illusion that although life is temporary, it can be prolonged. One day we were in the train going to Allahabad and going through countryside and villages. Prabhupada was looking out. This is 77. He said, by Krishna's grace, the mass of people in India at that time are still living in the village, are still illiterate. By Krishna's grace, they are still illiterate. How is that? What? Krishna's grace. So they have been spared from hearing the scientific bluffing of Darwin. Then one day we were talking about university preaching, youth, what you call it, your youth program. So Prabhupada said, here is real advertisement. If you want to become an ass very quickly, then come to our university. These are little Prabhupada sayings. Oh, it's funny. Prabhupada said at that time, Gopal Krishna, Prabhupada was talking about in China, Communist Wall, Mao Zedong, I don't know if you know the name, Mao Zedong, he was like Hitler, like Stalin, like Lenin. And in China they had this, they called it Little Red Book. Everyone in the whole country had to have the Little Red Book of the sayings of Mao. Be like having a little book, the sayings of Hitler. Sayings of the great demons, right? So Prabhupada said, tell Gopal Krishna he should publish the Little Red Book of Srila Prabhupada's sayings. I'll have to read him this when I see him. That's what Prabhupada said. Well, then, during that time, on January 12th, we presented Srila Prabhupada the first Japanese Bhagavad Gita. BBT had just come out with it. This was very special. There was a special experience of presenting Prabhupada with one of his books for the first time. I had the mercy of being able to do this more than once with his own books as they were coming out. In fact, there's one really nice, funny story. Prabhupada last time in America was 1976. And in June, he had gone to New York. We had bought that big temple on West 55th Street. It was a mid-rise building, but to us, it was a skyscraper, 16-story building in Manhattan. From a storefront to that, this was the most glorious moment for Prabhupada. And during that time, there was going to be Rath Yatra for the first time down 5th Avenue, the most famous street in the whole world, of the whole earth. So this was a really special time for Prabhupada. So anyway, we had just come out, let's see, 77, this would be one of the either 8th or 9th canto books at that time. And we arranged for the printer, the second it was done, to send it immediately by airplane express to the New York airport. And Radha Ballava, he was the production manager, and myself, we went to the airport maybe like 1 or 2 in the morning, waiting. We got the book. And we rushed back to the new temple. And we go up to Prabhupada's quarters. I think we had him on the 11th floor, if I remember correctly. Anyway, Prabhupada was up because for those hours from 12 to 4, those were his work hours, when everyone else was asleep and no one was calling, no one was bothering, no letters, no knocks on the door, nothing like that. He could close out this material world and in his samadhi go back to Krishna. And that's how he wrote his books. He had to have perfect concentration as in his mind he was coming out with the books, and Krishna would be speaking to him. Do it this way, say it that way. That's how he described how he wrote his books. Just so we understand the difference between his writing and anyone else's writing. There is no one else alive that can write like that. Right? For Krishna. You see him, you hear him, and he's helping. This is our Prabhupada. So anyway, he was up. Radha Ballava and I come to the temple, and we each have a volume of the same book, right? And we go up to his room, and I turn the doorknob to look in, and I see him at his desk working. Normally, you don't dare disturb him during those times, but I took some license for this reason, for this occasion, and he saw us. I said, come. And so we walked in, we prayed our dandavats, we were hiding the books like little children. We were just hiding them. And then we stood up and we were holding them behind our back. But we were not very good actors. Our face gave us away that we had something. It was very obvious that we were like children beaming, trying to not laugh. So Prabhupada said, come. And then we handed him the book. And handing Prabhupada one of his books, this was like The only thing I can compare it to is something that happened every day with Srila Prabhupada in his quarters, which was prasadam. At the right time, no matter what Prabhupada was doing, he could be meeting with someone, he could be getting massage, whatever it was, but when that plate of prasadam came out, and you could see it, you could see Prabhupada's experiencing it as if Krishna has appeared before my eyes in his transcendental form of prasad. And so there was such an amazing change or transformation in the atmosphere in the room. Whatever was going on, God has just appeared. Such rapt attention on the prasadam, such reverence, such respect, such love, such devotion that it's Krishna. That's how Prabhupada dealt with prasadam when it arrived. So that's the only thing I can compare this experience to, of handing Prabhupada a new book. Because we once asked Prabhupada for the devotees at ISKCON Press and the artists. You know, there's 9 categories of devotional service, right? So we said, Prabhupada, for those of us who are making your books, what is that category? Prabhupada said, oh, that is deity worship. You're preparing the deity, dressing, decorating, getting the deity ready to be seen by the world, right? So Prabhupada said, for those devotees working on the books, that is deity worship. And then he said, and as soon as the book appears, then it changes from deity worship to Shravanam Kirtanam, and especially Kirtanam. So those are the categories of devotional service that Prabhupada described, making the books and distributing the books. So anyway, so we came into his room with these books, and once he took that book, every detail, he would look at it. Those books had jackets. Each one was 400 pages. Each one had 8 color plates. 1 picture of Prabhupada and 7 paintings. He would look at the artwork, because that was his brilliant idea, how to sell books of a philosophy that no one had ever heard of, and which can sometimes be difficult to follow. I mean, after all, Srimad Bhagavatam, you have Shukadeva Goswami conversation with King Parikshit. And then, much later, at Naimisharanya, you have Sutta Goswami, who was there when Sukadeva was talking to Parikshit about what are the things you should do when you're getting ready to die. So now, Sutta Goswami, to the sages at Naimisharanya, he's repeating those conversations. So you've got interwoven conversations going on in the Bhagavatam. It's not exactly a chronology. And then, Sukadeva Goswami, as he's narrating, is telling, and in this time, this is how Narada preached to the sons of the Prajapati to get them to take sannyas and not be helping their father populate the world. So Sukadeva is describing famous conversations in the history of our universe, and Sutta is repeating them, and so it can be a little confusing sometimes to follow all these conversations. But Prabhupada gave the idea, I want to present this very complicated subject matter through art. No one has done this before. I will show them what these philosophies are. I will show them who is having these special conversations, who is creating this universe, and who are the secondary creators, who's maintaining this all. I will show them through this art. So when the book came out, he would look at the cover, he would look at the spine, he would touch the paper to make sure it's good quality. He would look at the end paper. Then he would start looking at the pictures. So all this time he's looking, smiling, looking, smiling. And then he would start opening it up. And that was more or less the signal to leave. Because once he opened it up, he would start reading it. And it's like we weren't there anymore. No one was there anymore. Prabhupada was now in the spiritual world reading about Krishna. And everything else was gone. That's how he dealt with these books. So seeing that, we could never forget that experience. And to this day, that's how we should be treating when we open the books and start reading those books. Prabhupada never took them lightly. They were like his samadhi. So anyway, that was a nice story. And I told that story because we gave Prabhupada this Japanese Bhagavad Gita. Here in Bombay, we had a similar experience. Looking at the book, but it was in Japanese. So it's not like he took the time to open it and start reading. So then he said, "Thank you very much. You have done something." And although he said it like it was the greatest thing in the world, you have done something, I'm reading it to you now like, we are little insects. We've done something that the representative of God accepted. Now, years later, I can read it that way. But at that moment, oh, you've done something. Like we did something special, like we're great creators or managers or something. And then he said, the Japanese were like Lord Nrsimhadev. And then he said, if you install a big temple of Nrsimhadev killing, they will like. And ever since then, whoever has been preaching in Japan, I have read them this. And one day, it hasn't happened yet, one day we will have this great big temple for Lord Nrsimhadev killing material life, killing sex, Hiranya, Kashipu. What does that name mean? Soft bed and everything material is being ripped to shreds by Lord Nrsimhadev. And Prabhupada said that's how you preach it. You preach in Japan that way with deities. You have some question before I keep reading? Yes.
I had always had this doubt, like when Prabhupada used to work on his books, he used to even say out the word-to-word meaning of Bhagavatam shlokas, and you used to translate that back to like Sanskrit word to English, and then used to get published. The Sanskrit words. The Prabhupada used to dictate even the word-to-word translations, or was it done by Prabhupada disciples who knew Sanskrit, or how it used to go? And putting the diacritic marks in the right place was a tedious job, what I understand.
Okay, first of all, Prabhupada planned the books with Devanagari script. And he planned them to have of course he was writing for English, he planned to have transliteration so that people who don't know Devanagari script can read the words. And then he planned the word synonyms. That was part of his dictation. When Prabhupada came to each text, he would give the word synonym. He would say the word, one word at a time, and say what it means. Some, all, this, that. Whatever the word was, he would give the meaning. And then he would speak how he translated it. Mostly you could see how the translation followed the way his words were, but every now and then, when Prabhupada gave the translation, and again, it was always after he gave the word synonyms, every now and then his translation would be a little different from how he used it specifically, like a dictionary. Word synonym is this. But in the translation, that's why to be a writer of Vedas is not a matter of great Sanskrit scholarship. It is a matter of great spiritual realization. Because one word could have many different meanings and could be used in many different ways. In, I think it was May of 1977, when there was indication that Prabhupada would be leaving, there was an emergency meeting of the whole GBC. We had to deal with what we never wanted to face, the unthinkable, a world without Prabhupada, physically present. We couldn't bear it, but we forced ourselves to come to this meeting, and we all discussed what questions should we ask Prabhupada, how things will go on. And we made a big list, and then Satsarup was the spokesperson to asking these different questions. And so, when he came to some of my questions, he said, Srila Prabhupada, we have heard from Rameshwar. I'll give you the exact quote. January 15th, 1977. And I'm the BBT trustee who was publishing his books. So this was official. This is not just a conversation any devotee with Prabhupada. This is a BBT conversation. I asked Prabhupada, if you finish the Bhagavatam, what books will you give us next? I asked that question in January. So this is what Prabhupada said. If I can finish the Bhagavatam, I will immediately begin the Padma Purana, Brahma Vaivata Purana, Markandeya Purana, Taittiriya Upanishad, and the Katha Upanishad. And I was just, wow. So, in May, I told the whole GBC, I had already written this in my BBT newsletter that went around the world in February. I didn't keep anything secret. But I told the GBC, let's ask this question to Srila Prabhupada. There's finishing the Bhagavatam. He's in the middle. He has just started 10th canto. And then there's these other books. And if Prabhupada leaves us, just like succession, he has GBC for managing. He eventually had Ritvik Gurus become initiating gurus for continuing the disciplic line in between the next great Acharya. So how will the writing continue? So that was my question, which Satsrupa asked Prabhupada. So Srila Prabhupada looked around and started explaining that writing Vedic literature is not just a matter of scholarship. You can be a great scholar, but that does not mean you're getting the realization of what is truly in the text and how to give the true purport. And so he looked at us and said, who will do? What is your suggestion? And because different devotees had become very experts, scholarly devotees, so we thought maybe they could do it. So then I said, Prabhupada, you have established a different standard in the BBT. Your books are not this is not like a regular publishing company. These are books from a pure devotee of God, from the spiritual world coming down into our world. That's the standard that you have established, Srila Prabhupada, for the BBT in all of its books. Who can do that? So Prabhupada said, yes, he has spoken correctly. Who can do that? And one day, there may be another pure devotee that can write, that was sent to this world to write like that. In the meantime, he always encouraged devotees, his disciples, to write. But it's not, we all understand, not the same. It's never the same when you compare to Krishna is speaking directly to someone every word, guiding every word. There's a little different standard, right? A lot of times Prabhupada, in that month I was with him, was just thinking of how this Krishna Consciousness movement is going to change this whole world. We are only in the first 50 years. This is a 10,000 year movement. 10,000 years. Where the whole world is going to eventually. We don't even see how any of this happens. So many things in ISKCON we never saw how it was going to happen, but Prabhupada saw it was going to happen. So one day there will be a world government, one world government again, like at Vedic culture, Vedic times. A Krishna conscious government of a Kshatriya Vaishnava guided by Vaishnava Brahmins. That's going to happen within this 10,000 years. We can't see that now, but that's what Prabhupada has said. So this is what he said. That is my only ambition. That so many people can become enlightened. But they're being deprived of this chance. One day, the whole world will appreciate how we have changed the face of the world from darkness to light. And then another one of those quotes about Sita and Ram. American money and Indian culture. This combination will benefit the whole world. This plan is good. Lakshmi should be used only in the service of Narayan. Sita is meant only for the service of Ram. And this should be our vision. Everything is Ram's property, and the manifestation of the property, Lakshmi, Sita, this should be only in his service. I'll just read a few more. So one day, Prabhupada and I were riding in this train car, a sleeper car. So it had two beds, Prabhupada in one of them and I'm in the other. Just the idea of me sleeping in front of my spiritual master. For me, sleep is tamagun. And for Prabhupada, sleep is with Krishna. It's like, talk about darkness and light, day and night. So when you're in the same room with Prabhupada, it's like you're embarrassed. It's embarrassing. So anyway, I wrote this. I sat in the coach after tasting Srila Prabhupada's remnants of prasad. So he would eat. And he would insist after he was done that I eat off the same plate. That's Prabhupada. So I was sitting in the coach after tasting Srila Prabhupada's remnants of prasad, feeling the greatest devotion to Srila Prabhupada and his mission. He asked me to read some reviews of his Bhagavad Gita, which we published in Back to Godhead, Volume 12, Number 1. He liked it when we read these reviews. He was feeling great happiness, and I began reading some of the even better reviews that we published in this booklet, The Krishna Consciousness Movement is Authorized. On and on they went, the scholars, praising his work, praying for him to go on with his mission and his writing, hoping the whole world will understand his message. I mean, if you've ever seen some of these reviews, these sentiments are written by scholars about Prabhupada's work. It's really incredible. Hoping the whole world will understand his message. That's from the reviews. And his gift to the ethical and spiritual life of mankind. Finally, smiling, he lay down to take rest. Feeling, I think, that his work would start a revolution to change the entire course of human history. So I was thinking this, and then Prabhupada had this amazing ability to know what you were feeling, what you were hoping and praying for, and what you were thinking. You know, someone asked me once, I'll just share with you something very personal and confidential. As you may know, I have given initiation to some hundreds of devotees. And so they once asked me, if we offer prasadam and there's your picture, do you know we're even doing that? I thought that was a good question. And I knew the answer. And the answer is no. Unless you are on the highest level of realization, at that moment, no, I didn't know. So I explained. But that's okay, because I am just a little tiny post office. There's this great big postal system where if you bring your letter to a mailbox or a little post office, it will go all the way to the person you're writing to. And the mailbox doesn't know even, but it still works. So that's Madhyam Adhikari Guru. It works. But they don't have that knowledge that it's working anyway if they're acting faithfully. But now you come to someone like Prabhupada. This is different. He could know what you were praying for. He could know what was in your heart, in your mind, in your thoughts. He could know. It was incredible. And many devotees of Prabhupada have said this, that in their memories, sometimes they would be with Prabhupada and he would just look at them and say exactly the right thing that they were thinking and hadn't even said yet. I'm sure you've heard some of those memories. It's a mystic power, a spiritual power that Prabhupada had. So this was one of those moments where I was thinking about how Prabhupada's books, look at these reviews. One day this is going to change the whole world. And Prabhupada's lying down, getting ready for rest. And he looks up at me and says, yes. I hadn't said anything. But he says, yes. The pen is mightier than the sword. And then he said, yes. Again, he said, yes. It is a revolution. That is what I think as I write on and on. The communists have changed the lives of people throughout the world by their empty literature and their false promises. Why not a revolution started on the basis of absolute truth? So, one time, Prabhupada and I were talking about the future of Kali Yuga, whether there would be wars, what would happen to the economies, how things would be collapsing, and what role the Krishna Consciousness movement would be playing during these turbulent times. And finally, it was ready for rest. So Prabhupada lay down, and I, of course, lay down immediately. I was asleep. Because when you're a devotee, unlike being 1 foot in the material world or 2 feet in the material world, which is the material world means a place of anxiety. Vaikuntha, that word means a world where there is no anxiety. And the material world means the world where there is only anxiety. So that's why sometimes people can't fall asleep right away, or they have crazy dreams, it keeps them up at night, anxiety. But when you're a devotee, and you have faith that I'm in the hands of my Guru, I'm in the hands of Krishna, I have that faith. I'm just serving, and whatever happens, it's Krishna's will. That's a life of no anxiety, right? So for devotees, their head can hit the pillow, they could be immediately asleep, very blissful, no anxiety. So this was about 12 o'clock at midnight. We took rest. Around, I think it was maybe 1:30, I just immediately felt wide awake. I opened my eyes and Prabhupada is sitting there in the other bed, waiting for me to wake up. because he wanted to continue the conversation. So those are some of my memories of traveling and living with Prabhupada. I'll tell some more tomorrow morning, right? Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.